Hey, welcome everybody, and welcome to dynatraceGo. Thrilled to have everybody online. Really exciting day for me personally. I get to sit down and have a conversation with a tech icon and technology entrepreneur, and somebody who's been a philanthropist and giving back for more than 40 years now. It's strange to give an introduction to somebody who doesn't need an introduction of any sort, but I'm sitting with Steve Wozniak, and he's helped to shape the computing industry with his design of Apple's first products, the Apple I and the Apple II, as well as having a huge influence on the Macintosh, which is, as everybody knows, still in production today. In 1976, Steve and Steve Jobs co-founded Apple Computer, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and super excited to have you. So welcome, Steve.
I'm very glad to be here. I always love talking to people in the technology world.
Outstanding. Well, let me tell you a little bit about who's online today. We've got several thousand, probably close to 10,000 IT and cloud executives from around the world, all in global companies and in all kinds of industries, in banking, travel, retail, government, manufacturing, etc. And as we were thinking about, who would be interesting to come and talk to them, you're always, an interesting person to get and talk to just because of the influence you've had in the business. But it really intersects at the point of creating innovations, transforming industries, and creating, innovative environments. As you know, these companies are all going, as everybody in the audience knows, everybody's going through a digital transformation at some point or another. Those that don't are going to get left behind, and that's true in every industry. The other thing that's happening simultaneously, which is adding both ease and complexity, is the shift from traditional data centers to the cloud and doing things like microservices and Kubernetes, where things are up and coming and kind of happening, all over the place. So super excited to have you talk about, innovation and things like that, like we had talked about. But I think probably I'd be remiss, and I think people would be disappointed at me if I didn't start kind of, at least as the beginning of you as a public figure, which is you've been known as an innovator for decades, but people really would like to hear about that story of getting Apple Computer going. And how you and Steve Jobs created Apple and kind of what that felt like at the time of, creating basically a fundamentally new industry, even a segment of the economy.
Yes, I was really skilled in electronics and then digital, and then this is in elementary school even. So we're talking decades before Apple, a decade or so. And so innovation came to me because I could sit down, buy a few parts or put them together. I knew how to put them together, make something of my own. And that's something that didn't exist otherwise. And I just kept going and going. All my spare time was spent innovating, trying to design little things. Now, there's the company. And Steve was more an innovator of a company. He wanted a company. Now, the computer itself, that was a key to it because I'd been building projects for about 5 years leading up to Apple. And I knew Steve Jobs during that time. And he would come in and always find ways to turn my little projects into money. He lived out of state. And I designed this computer. Well, I didn't really design this thing that became the Apple I wasn't designed as a computer. It was designed as this incredible thing. The ARPANET existed. There were only 6 computers in the United States on the ARPANET, but if I had a terminal, I could talk to them. So I designed out of all the chips and all. I could easily do that. I could get the chips where I worked at Hewlett-Packard. I built this little terminal that worked with my television set at home because I could never afford a teletype, cost as much as a car. And I had this, and then I modified it quickly into being a computer. So rather than typing on a keyboard to a computer far away, let's say Boston, and then it types back to my TV in California, now I put my own computer on with a microprocessor and Forte dynamic memory chips. And at the time I did that, I was in the Homebrew Computer Club. And I saw all these people talking about starting up a revolution, and they were all taking kind of low-level engineering approaches, using only static RAM off an Intel data sheet, and they weren't. And my product was so far beyond those for what it could do for what price. And I gathered people around me. Then Steve Jobs came into town, and it's not like that Jobs movie that shows him grabbing me as a geek in a basement, calling me to a club. I was a hero at the club. I'd been there since the first day it started. Steve had never been to the club. Brought him down, and he saw the interest, and he said, we should start a company. Because Steve wanted to do important things for the world. He wanted to be an important person. And me, I don't want to self-promote. I don't want to need to be above everyone else. I just want to be a good engineer. And he said, we should start a company. And I said, I am loyal to my company, Hewlett-Packard, and I won't leave them I'll have to get their approval. And so they gave me the first release. The first, they signed it off for the first of 5 times they signed off personal computers. No big companies really thought this was going to amount to anything. And that was sort of a benefit for us. But the real company, Apple, was the second start with the Apple II computer, which we were showing my Apple II computer before we ever shipped an Apple I. And this Apple II computer was going to revolutionize everything. It was like 5 years ahead. I'd figured out how to do color television instead of all the calculus mathematics. Just to put a number, a digital number on a wire into a TV at the right rate and time, and the TV would think it was color, even though it didn't match all the engineering books. And that was the first time ever that arcade games, you play arcade games at a bowling alley. That was the first time ever they would be color, and the first time ever that arcade games would be software. Imagine an arcade game back in those days had 150 chips, thousands of wires, and a skilled engineer like myself would hook them all up to get signals from chips going at the right way. That would take a year to design a new game. Now that it was software, a 9-year-old could do it in a day. And Steve and I, when we saw that, I called him over to my apartment. I showed him how I wrote a game in 30 minutes. It was good. Breakout right on the computer in color. And we were shaking because we knew that this was a new generation for games, and games were the key. So by starting that real company, by the way, we needed money because we knew we'd ship 1,000 of these easy. And how do you build 1,000 when you have no money? I had no savings account. Steve had no savings account. We had just absolutely zero. We didn't have any rich relatives. So we had to look for money, and we got an investor, and he owned a third of the company basically, and Steve owned a third, and I owned a third. We were all equal. And the investor, Mike Markolo, was the adult, and he taught us how to run a company and who you hire and what their jobs are. And he was important in marketing, so he taught Steve Jobs a lot of marketing principles. But Steve just learned everything so fast, and he was out there. And now he was founder of a company that had big money put in, and that was his personality was settling around then, and it's settled to be he'd be the king of computers.
Gotcha. Did you start out when you got Apple going? Did you think you were kicking off a computing revolution, or was it more of let's build what's interesting and see what people think? And the latter, if it wasn't kind of at the beginning, what was the aha moment where you're like, I'm on to something we're on to something that's way bigger than what we thought?
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground. I felt we were in a revolution because I'd been attending the Homebrew Computer Club for a year, where everyone talked about the revolution. People will be able to afford their own computers and are going to turn the world upside down. And I believed in that, although no big companies or analysts thought it'd go anywhere. But Steve came along and basically started looking. Analysts were just starting to predict this was going to be that once a decade thing where a market starts and grows to billions in a short time. And that helped us get investment. So we knew that we were big. And the reason we knew we were big, we had a product that was way ahead of anything else you could look at. I mean, we could price it so many times higher, and well, basically, I just explained, it was a new day for games. What was going to get a computer in the home wasn't doing the things that computers did, inventory analysis and sales figures. No, it was going to be games, and we had a real arcade machine. So we just had all the pride. We thought that, yes, it was going to be a big revolution because the analysts were just starting to say that, agree with us. And we thought that we were a leading company, and we're going to keep our leadership as the market grows.
Right. That's great. That's great. So, big history of innovation, of course, and everybody knows that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, everybody in the audience that's online is going through a digital transformation in their business in some form or another. As you've worked with teams in creative and innovative environments and kind of innovative teams, what advice would you have for people who are trying to bring more innovation and more digital transformation into their business? How do you set up teams around that?
Yeah. Well, today with our, cloud computing and everything is out there, Steve Jobs thought that way largely from experience in high school. His only experience with computers before Apple was a teletype, talking to something big that really ran your programs out there far away. So he was into the thinking that turned out to come to be a reality because broadband going up and up, and and everything is cloud-based. Now, I worked on projects on my own, just doing both sides of the program, maybe a solution to a certain game, and then setting up the website of it and having the interactive web pages. did that long before we, back when we only had dial-up modems, a few of us. And, that was my thing. But as the industry grows and you're depending upon all this legacy code, that hundreds, thousands of lines written by other people, and you just trust it and have to work with it. I didn't follow up on that. Apple was so successful, I pretty much followed up on Apple's products and the apps and what you could do with it and explaining that to people.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Cool. And as you've innovated, you personally have also gone through a number of transformations, or just kind of continued to add things to your list. From a tech entrepreneur to somebody who's a philanthropist to somebody who's involved in education, and a speaker, all of those kind of things. It seems like there's been a lot of personal transformation there as well to remain a leading thinker. Do you think about that, or does that just happen? How do you recommend people stay fresh and kind of continue to keep a transformational mindset?
Yeah, well, the thoughts I have, well, I'm most proud of being an engineer because I was so good at such a young age, and I knew that I was teaching myself to design things in better ways than other people. And that was probably the most important thing. But then I get asked, what are you proudest of? And it's really less Apple or less bringing personal computers to the world. And it's more of, I don't know, the parts of me that cared about people and want to help people that don't have as much, want to educate. My size time as an educator, let's say.
Yep. Got it. Yep.
But, when we started Apple, we said these computers, Steve Jobs especially, it's the future. It lets people do more than they could. It makes them more powerful. It's like you've got $1 million computer that only $1 million company had before, and you've got it in your hand. But the thing is, a computer could help somebody who had a problem write a program and get a solution. And that makes the person more of a person and in charge, more of a master of their own life. They didn't have to submit a program to a company that ran it for them and did stuff. It was very motivating. And motivation is more important than skills and knowledge, in my opinion. I learned that from my teaching time.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting that you talk about the early days of thinking as computers augmenting what people can do and allowing them to maybe do some other things. Today we all take computing for granted, and the hot new word, or maybe it's been around for decades, but the thing that people are talking about is artificial intelligence and AI in many of the same ways, both for the, hey, it can enable us to do stuff, and wow, maybe we should be afraid of that. And I know you've been pretty outspoken on this and pretty optimistic in terms of kind of how AI works and kind of where it can have an impact. Can you share a little bit there?
Well, technology does things that we couldn't do just by ourselves, right from just making the first wheel and wagon and bicycle. But today it's like we talk about artificial intelligence. To me, that's the highest end of taking computers, of programming them, of designing logic that tries, 1 million things over a week or 1 billion things over a week and finds the best patterns. No person could play 1 billion games of chess in their life. So of course we build machines that can do things you never thought were possible, even with the technology of a year before, a decade before, 2 decades before. You really couldn't foresee such things. And AI is sort of just the highest state. I don't call it true intelligence like a human brain, but AI lets us do things we couldn't do without it. AI can recognize a dog picture faster than a human, and it doesn't know what a dog is. A 1-year-old knows what a dog is, but Google can recognize it faster. And we're talking about cars that will drive themselves. That is a huge problem, much huger than we know. Unless you have a narrow track, you've made it a deal where it's not really thinking. But if it's looking at every little sign, obstacle, every little rock on the ground, and acting the way a human does, that's what we want to do. In Apple, we made products that were easy to use. We got a reputation for that. And that meant that a person had to understand how to use the computer. Our publications department under Jeff Raskin for quite a while, if an engineer came up with an idea, created it, but they couldn't write it down in an understandable way, the publications department could deny features in products. And I thought that was really good because to me, it meant the human should be more important than the technology. You should not modify all your human ways to use the technology. You should have the human technology work in such natural human ways that you almost don't have to modify your own thinking. We're in between on that. We've done some really good things such as the voice assistants that can listen to you speaking a thought rather than going through the structure of, oh, I open this app, I click over here, I slide here, they do this, all these steps. No, there's no steps. You just say what you want and you get an answer sometimes.
Got it. Got it. And does that tie into, the computer and AI as an assistant to humans and maybe taking over, other lower level thinking tasks, if you will? Does that tie into kind of creating innovation as well? Should we or could we be thinking about AI, creating more space for innovation for humans so they can go do more fun, kind of more innovative things?
The way I think is that the human is more important, and the best computer response, or AI these days, is if it acts like a friendly human who is a friend, who does like you, who wants to help you. Right. And sometimes we get trapped because, well, AI sometimes doesn't work in a very general sense, like the way a human would, and adapt to something it didn't expect. And we're getting, so that's what we need to put a lot of effort into doing better and better. Also, AI doesn't have a moral sense, an ethical sense, I will only tell, strict unbiased truth, and I won't do things that are kind of harmful to people in ways. What is harmful? It hasn't grown up with a human life. It doesn't know what's harmful to humans. Things like, privacy, for example, and, tracking you and all that. I mean, AI is really good at taking a lot of data and condensing it down to smaller amounts of data, just like the brain does, but we don't know how a real brain is wired. So we're going to have to wait on that. I mean, I was at a company that did figure out how to make a brain, and it takes 9 months.
All right, you got me on that one. I got you. That's funny. So that's great.
But I'm really looking forward to the future world of what AI can do for us. But basically, it has to guess at what we're going to do, what we want, and you can do that a lot from patterns for a lot of people, but creative people are never fall in the category if you can predict what they're going to say next, what they're going to buy next, what they're going to do next. And they kind of oppose a lot of that.
Yep. That's great because, I know a lot of the audience, is thinking about this very issue because AI is, largely on their plates because the world has changed, right? When you look at Kubernetes and microservices and cloud computing and the like, the complexity of these environments that come up for IT and come up and go away so quickly, there's more there than a human being can possibly understand. So a lot of people are looking at and using AI as basically this way to augment their teams. How do we get their teams more productive to allow them to do exactly the stuff that we're talking about today? Be more innovative and have more free time to kind of think about innovation and kind of create space for driving these digital transformations that are going on.
Well, I'd like an AI that will run on my phone and notify me whenever I'm taking actions that maybe I need better protection. Maybe it'll change names automatically and protect me more. The AI seems to be applied on the other end of the formula.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you look forward a few years, this is impossible it's an absolutely impossible question to answer maybe, but I know if I'm sitting with anybody who's got the ability to do so, I'm sitting with the right person. But if you look forward in 10 years from now, it's 2031, anything that's radically different than the world that's driven by technology that you've been thinking about? Is everything autonomous? Everything electric? With drones? Do we finally get the hoverboard kind of our way? Or have you thought about this?
Look how differently we live today than we used to. Every time I run an app on my phone, I might run 30 apps in a day, and at the moment I use it, that was the most important thing. How would I have done those things? From making reservations and tracking flights and things like that. How would you ever do that? So there's always surprises. There's new things coming out that change life in great ways, and you don't necessarily see them coming in advance. I don't read any stories other than the listeners here do, and we sort of see some things that are already underway. But the real surprises, the home runs, the ones that take life in a different direction, you can't really predict. There really isn't a good formula. And it sometimes starts with a little discovery by physicists or chemists that makes something a different way, a new material, and it has new properties, and it simplifies structures and allows something to be a different way than it's been in the past. It's very hard to track which ones of those will succeed and which won't. Now, as far as AI having a role in that, what is wealth? Wealth to me is choice. If you have enough wealth, you can always buy other things and buy yourself around obstacles. So it's really a lot of choice. And a lot of times, we don't have enough choice. And AI should always think of, can I give the user some simplified choices? Can I suggest things that the user might really want to do now, but not force it on them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you look at this, do you look as AI and automation as two different things, or are they kind of tied tightly to one another? Because it seems like the more accurate AI can be about predicting or making decisions or kind of getting down the root causes of things, the more we can begin to make things autonomous and let things drive on their own, from that perspective. When I say drive, I don't mean car, but, in terms of, like things inside of, inside of our organizations and completely autonomize things.
Yeah. Well, there's the huge movement is towards AI to make things autonomous and save us effort and save us thinking. That's what all technology should do. It should make life easier. But, also AI, okay, you talk about self-driving. There's limitations because we live in a human world. Cars aren't like programs. They aren't like mathematics where 2 + 2 always equals 4. You drive a street, it's not going to be the same. There'll be a tire in the road, a rock in the road, a little animal run. There's going to be so many factors and they aren't predictable in advance. AI can be trained for things that are known in advance, but there's too many hard to predict ones. So there's limits. Self-driving is a good example. There's limits as to how far AI can go and help us. Automation, there's a lot of types of automation that doesn't have any AI either. So there's a crossover. You can have automation where just, we'll look at a manufacturing plant, a factory. A lot of automation doesn't have to have a huge amount of intelligence. It's good, though, to see that intelligence is getting applied these days. For example, at a car manufacturing facility, yes, you have cameras that are actually seeing and judging things, judging distances and moving in and getting everything just right. Those are very useful into technology because in the end, they do a job for less money. Now, automation, there's a trap with automation too, which is you get used to it. You expect it, you live by it, and let's say one day you go out to do something, navigate somewhere, and the internet is out, or your computer dies. There's, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it in the old school ways. I'm trapped. If Facebook's down, how do I ever communicate with my friends? I don't know how to use email even. So got to be careful about this automation. There should always be a lot of local backups too. And if you lose connection to the cloud, it's nice to have some kind of backup that can work on its own. One example I had was when Apple first had Siri, although Siri existed for a year before Apple had it, buy it as a third-party app. But you would speak into Siri and what was I going to say? I got to remember. Oh, it would, I could say, call Janet, and it would call my wife. And it understood that. And then, the phone did. This is before Siri. The phone did that. Then Siri came. You'd say, call Janet. You'd wait. You'd wait some more, and then get told Siri's not available or something. It's like, come on. It used to do it inside, build that in too, and I still have a chance of, it's like the old days where you actually own things. The cloud really has moved us to this world where you want to not own things, but rent, subscribe to certain things. It's a very efficient business model, but you almost own nothing. Your data goes out in the cloud. And, you can find out, even if it's lost, you kind of have no rights to it. You've given them up when you signed the EULA.
Yeah. I tell you that your analogy to maps and basically being able to get somewhere without the AI, you're going to make a lot of people in our development team at Dynatrace happy with that, because the way we, by the way, in terms of personality, call our AI Davis. And the way Davis works is they've designed it to be fully explainable. So we show our math. It's like second grade math. Show your work, right? Which is, if we come to a conclusion, we show people exactly how that happened and basically give them the map through the Smartscape. which is the technology that basically maps everything in the IT environment, so that the AI is very transparent as to what's going on, and keeps the human contact in there, so that people get more of a relationship and more trusting as to what's going on with it. And it's not just kind of random black box guesses that happen in that way.
Yeah.
So
It's good to hear, but we also have to be honest with our customers and tell them you're still got to watch over, some things in the end, just like Tesla has its self-driving and beta. I don't even count beta.
Yeah, I got you. That makes sense. Just for us as tech leaders, and everybody in the audience today is a tech leader at some point or another, what you've kind of seen, over your career, has it kind of shaped your thinking about what responsibilities, opinions, or thinking about what responsibilities we have in tech, and what the role of tech is in society and kind of those who make it?
Oh, I love tech. We had our own computers, and then we had mouses, and the world got more familiar to a human, and we made products that were easier and easier to use, and better printers and accessories. And then the internet came. Oh my gosh, for the next decade, it was the most beautiful, fresh breath of freedom. My gosh, there's all these things that I didn't have a way to do before. Anywhere in the world, I can publish things without having to go through a money-making publisher. This was freedom. And we're now free from these controlling arms that control our lives, the big retailers and the governments and all that. Obviously, it's gone in the opposite direction. The internet was able to be used against us. It's not like I have a connection to the internet and I'm on the internet. No, I have to go through a behavior judging, party to get on the internet. And these bring me some negative feelings about, where technology's gone compared to the early days, and, and things that go on, and how influenceable you are by, salesmen and whatnot, snake oil salesmen, and the social web especially can be misused this way. And I wish we had, more choice, the ability to buy your way out of it. Look,
yeah.
I love what you do for me, but here's a little bit of money that you don't do additional tracking. You don't use it for the bad things, only for the things I want.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. So as people break today, through dynatraceGo, people are going to spend the rest of the day thinking about, how do they accelerate their digital transformations, as I said, across lots of different industries in their companies. Anything that you encourage them to keep in mind as they think about that, as they think about how do I become more transformational? How do I innovate more in my company? How do I accelerate the pace of innovation in my company?
Yeah. Well, first of all, every company, of course, does, as you've been pointing out, has to go into the modern digital world and have to start thinking about AI for solutions, because you're always trying to make something better than it was before. And there isn't a company that makes, hammers still has huge numbers of programmers needed, to run their business. So that's such a critical thing. It goes to every single company in the world, every single product category. And it's just, I don't know, you're thinking about, I need this much AI and this, that, but you need people that are thinking, how can it be used? And as I mentioned before, the best marketing is for yourself. What would I want it to behave like? And sometimes that gets lost, because as you go down the management ladder, every manager has a quota to get something done that they've assured to their manager above to get their bonus and all that, of it done by a certain date. And it's not the freedom of engineering that I was used to as a sole inventor, where I could sit down and say, oh, I've got another idea, I could add something. It's very difficult sometimes in a company project, because you've already gotten a 40-page document approved by 10 levels of signatures. And how do I go back? So that little inventive spirit should be appreciated all the way from the top down. Hewlett-Packard had some great values when I worked there, that any engineer in the company could talk right up to Bill Hewlett or David Packard at the top. You didn't have to go through a flow of hierarchy and organization. And that just felt so good being there. The company cared about you like you were a family member. And if you were having trouble on your job on a certain project, it was the company's duty to find a place in the company where you would fit, not leave you out on the street with no money and, and on your own looking for another job. No, it treated people very well. And so many things they did to make it enjoyable for all the people that were even in different disciplines within the company to get together and meet a lot of times, twice a day. That coffee got rolled in to pull people away from their desks to meet the other people that were around them, see what they could do. So a lot of these humanistic things a psychologist might come up with that makes you get along better with your working members is very important to getting the things done. And also, you want to have a lot of crosstalk, whether you're going out on your own to a lunch with some matrix. What could we do? What could we add to this product? How should it work? Keep your ideas flowing. And a CEO has to keep the money coming. And it has to run, has to have engineering developing certain types of products to keep things going. But there should always be a little side group or something. Once in a while you hear of skunk works projects and CEO funds some young person to develop something all on their own. We had some incredible stories in the early days of Apple's along those lines. So, but keep a little group that's sort of thinking about others. You hear the word disruption a lot. You don't want to be disrupted in your company. That's what forces you to try to get higher level technology than the others. You want to be the leader. But there should be, I believe that there should be thinking about what could disrupt us and how could we disrupt the whole world. We can't quite come out with it now, but there's some ideas that if the world went a certain path and if cellular bandwidth went up to a certain level, which it did, you could predict certain products and where you should be. And the chief disruption officer, in my mind, should probably report to the board of directors, but not directly to the CEO. The CEO has to keep things running and we'll hear about what the chief disruption group is doing, but I think they really should report to the board of directors. It's that critical thing to be aware of, things that might even go against what we're doing now, that might compete with ourselves. You've got to keep an open eye. That's part of honesty. You see something that's better as a developer. You see something, oh my gosh, here's something I could have done or used better, or I could have done this with artificial intelligence, or hire somebody to do it. You should be willing to change directions.
Yep, great, super useful advice. So, as we're kind of reaching the end of our talk here, or conversation here, you've done this a number of times. Are there any things that I should have been asking you? Like, it's been like, these are phenomenal stories that you've kind of brought where you're like, God, I wish Mike would only ask me about that, because there's an interesting, there's an interesting piece that I have to add to the audience here. Anything that I'm forgetting to ask?
Well, the biggest question is how you get to innovation, but innovation is part of a personality. Some people are dedicated to be well-learned from books and good skilled developers, engineers, whatever. And others just have the spirit and want to go off and try different things. And some of those inventors usually want to be best in the world. Is there a way I can do things better than other people? And it doesn't get recognized a lot of time, those differences, but you certainly need them both in a company. And it's hard to manage them, especially when you think about what they always say, creative people kind of have ideas, but they don't work well on a team with others. Well, you've got to find places for them. Reorganize your company a little to allow that to happen. The future, you don't really see it in the next quarter's report, in the next year, sometimes not even the next 5 years. But you've got to be aware that there's going to be something out there, and you got to do the best for, let's say, your siblings, your future company.
Yeah. It's a big part of keeping high performance teams together as you think about that. Well, Steve, it's been great having you. Super appreciate you spending the time with us today. Some great nuggets for people to take away as they go into dynatraceGo. Maybe one thing to kind of to close on. If you look back, if you were giving advice to your younger self, kind of before you were involved in changing the world, a big part of changing the world and kind of driving the computing revolution, do you have any advice that you would kind of go back and tell the younger Steve Wozniak innovator that maybe we could take forward?
Sure. Have a goal in your heart, passion for your goal, believe in its importance, that it's going to do something good for the world, and not, it's going to make me so much money, and this and that. Think about that after the fact. If you do really good things, the money should come.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And for everybody watching, please enjoy the rest of DynatraceGo.
Bye, all.